Hey, what is going on, everybody? Boilon here, back for another video on Raid Shadow Legends. And in today's video, I want to talk about a question that I get somewhat frequently, and especially among earlier and some mid game players as well. And it's about gear. Now, I want to talk to you about kind of how to be gear efficient. And what I mean by this is, I want to talk about at what point do you sell blue gear? At what point in your roster do you move into purple and above, right? So some people ask me, Boilon, when do you sell blue and rare quality gear? Whether that's for accessories or for artifacts, right? This is a big deal. Also, 5 star versus 6 star. When do you move on to that? I want to talk about the gear that I keep, some of the gear that I sell, and at what stage maybe you can move past certain points, right? Because honestly, when it comes to raid, a lot of the big pain in the ass is inventory management, whether it's your accessories or whether it's your artifacts. I mean, they gave us an extra 200 pieces slots rather, but I do find that this will eventually fill up pretty quick, and you probably have a lot of gear sitting around that you don't necessarily need. So I'm going to try to break that down here all in today's video. Now, before I get started with the rest of the video, I do want to remind people that if you haven't started playing raid yet, what are you waiting for? You want to make a new alt account? Go do that too. Use the QR code in the top right hand of the screen to get King Galkabar absolutely free, and then Venomage, Tagor, and Farrakhan the Fat at accounts level 10, 20, and 30. Also, don't forget about Pelops the Victor. You can get him as well on a new account. All you got to do is use the promo code Super Victory within the first 48 hours of a brand new account. Okay, so the first things first, I want to talk about, because I have a tendency of forgetting to talk about this, I actually want to talk about accessories first. Um, Now, for a new account, okay, at what point do you get rid of certain gear? When I sell my gear, like you can see that, and I'll be honest, that accessories are a pain in the ass to sell, but there's one thing that I can tell you that is very easy to sell, with some exceptions. You can almost always, I would say, by about 3 to 4 months into your game, sell regular accessories, all standard accessories. There are a few exceptions where I would see sometimes you might get like a really good banner, for example, that has speed substats. Speed substat banners are very, very important because the speed stat in general is very, very important. So I would keep this in some instances if you happen to get some good rolls. Say, I don't know, like you're sitting on 15 to 20 plus speed on a banner, this is a pretty good deal. And where this might actually be better than other items. But by and large, there's a lot of these special or AKA 9 piece artifact sets in accessories, whether it's Feral, Merciless, Pinpoint, Stone Skin, Mercurial now with Grim Forest, right? And some of these other ones, Protection is important, Supersonic. There's Chronophage, which we now have in the event dungeons again. So there's a lot of these, what I call accessory sets, and particularly ones that are going to give you bonuses. We'll just click on Chronophage, for example, that by having 2 of them is going to give you 10% boost to speed. So this is a pretty big deal because by and large, having some of these pieces are going to be much better than having some of these standard sets that do nothing, right? Now, in the beginning, when you're a new player, this is basically all you're going to have. But I would say, it doesn't take long to start picking up some of these, especially the ones that you can find in the event dungeon, but also Mercurial. This is something that you're going to start to be able to work on, especially once you enter normal Grim Forest. And honestly, this doesn't take that long. You can start making progress in normal Grim Forest definitely within the first few months when you get that active and you have some characters that you can clear some of the nodes. You're obviously not going to be able to clear everything all at once and within the first month that you get it, but you are going to make some progress towards using some of these accessories and obtaining some of these for your roster. And once you start getting that, it's just better to use some of these than basically using the regular sets. So when it comes to selling accessories, by and large, now, unfortunately, there's not a better filter method for this, right? There's not a way that I can kind of go in here and filter non sets as far as I'm aware. So I would, for me, start at kind of like and I definitely, at my point in the game, I would sell anything that's basically under a 5 star. This might not be for you necessarily, but it is for me where I'm at. But then I go into the 5 stars and then I basically go down the list and I see, well, how much of this is standard sets? So I would go out of my way. And to be honest, even crap like this, like the revenge set, I'm not a big fan of these either. So I would go ahead and basically sell anything that is not part of a 9 piece uh, artifact set. So I would go down, I would see some of these I might, just because I've already leveled them up to 16, I guess I'll keep them. But yeah, as far as some of these eights, and I realize there's a little bit of speed on some of these. I think this one has some resistance. I might keep that one. But I do keep these resistance and accuracy banners. But other than that, I'm scrolling through down my list. I'm looking like how much of these kind of like other sets, like I'm just not going to use this stuff, like this revenge set. These are just really like bad kind of sets and things like that. So I'm just scrolling through. I tend to keep it, and where it gets a lot harder is trying to figure out, what to sell of the special sets, because yeah, some of them are going to be kind of crap. And I would tend to focus on things with flat stats for rings, an example, and for banners, and maybe banners that don't necessarily have speed stat, because speed is so important. But yeah, it's a really tough thing when it comes to inventory management. I'm not going to lie. It's one of the things I hate the most actually when it comes to this game, and it's not necessarily fast either, unless you utilize other third-party programs like RSL Helper and things like this, which might help you identify kind of what's crap. But then, I'm going to go through here. I'm like, okay, I probably don't have a lot of the regular sets left because I don't tend to run Spider that much. And when I do, I filter out these items anyways. So yeah, I'm going to have to, like, I would sell the normal set stuff if you're like, definitely, by 4 months on, you probably don't need it because you're going to start stacking up some of the nine-piece sets. So that goes for all things, whether it's rings, amulets, and banners, right? Those are things that you're not going to really need so much because over time you're going to start stacking up these nine-piece sets quite a lot. Now, when it comes to gear, I do want to talk about blue gear specifically. I don't keep blue gear really anymore, like very rarely. So I don't keep anything under 5 star. Now, I have run a bunch of new accounts, and I'll be perfectly honest that I would say within like 2 weeks, you can basically start dumping 4 star gear. It's just you get access, I would say, or available 5 star gear pretty quickly in Raid Shadow Legends, that even because you can just move your gear around for free, there's a lot of situations where you don't really need to keep, lots of different gear sets necessarily, right? Unless you just really hate swapping around. But I tend to do this. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sell all of this non 5 or 6 star gear. And that's a great place to start. And if you're like 6 months in, you definitely should be doing this already, in my opinion, because you're just not going to get a lot of value out of the stats of these items. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Now, when it comes to 5 star gear, now I do not really keep blue star gear, or sorry, blue quality rare gear anymore. Where is the here? I'm kind of blanking for a moment. Some of these ones that I did level up to 16, I do keep, but realistically, I'm probably not going to use any of this stuff, and I could probably sell it at this point as well. Now, what I would do and what I would consider is that if you have any basically lower tier, lower three, right, gloves, boots, and chest pieces, this is where I could see that you could be keeping some blue gear, because it has and especially if it's percentage stats. If it's flat stats, you can go ahead and sell that. And I just want to actually do that, and that's for any gear actually. So if you go 5 to 6 star gear, if you have any, say, gloves and chest pieces, I don't know how much of this I have, but say flat HP, definitely a sell. Now, the only instance where you might want to keep this if it has speed as a substat. Okay, so basically, I'm going to go into the substats. I'm going to take speed and none, or sorry, without. So I'm going to go ahead and sell any of these items that do not have speed as a substat. Why? Because there are certain cases where if you run like if you roll a quad roll in speed substats and you have like 20 plus speed on an item, it might be useful for PvP, specifically for certain characters that basically need maximum speed. But other than that, you're probably not going to use them. Flat stats are pretty garbage for most gear pieces, especially of these three lowers, right? You're just not going to use them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for now. And then what we're going to be doing here is take that off of the substats. That's just specifically for HP. So now I'm going to move that over to attack. We're going to do the same thing, right? So I don't want anything. There's not that much. I guess it's only 2 pieces here that don't have speed as a substat. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we're going to do this also and I realized that I probably sell a fair bit, so it's not actually listed there. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to go do the same thing for flat defense for the exact same reason. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to click speed stat without, we're going to go sell, we're going to select all. There's not a whole lot of items, right? But those are the things that absolutely that you can get rid of, because flat stats are trash and you are not going to use them. Now, the rest of them do have some value because in the chess piece category, you do have like resistance and accuracy, for example, as a main stat. So that is probably something that you're going to want to maybe perhaps keep a handful of them on hand to be able to use. And then when it comes to the boots, let's talk about this because this is really important. Now, you can definitely go ahead and get rid of any boots at all with HP, attack, or defense. Again, the flat stat stuff. So in this case, there is no speed. Well, you can have a speed substat, but speed substat on a flat stat main, you are not going to use. So you can go ahead and get rid of these, right? HP, attack, same thing. Flat attack, you're not going to use that. There's another 26 boots. There's some more money. Defense, same thing. There's some more money. So I just made about 5 million silver just selling those pieces there. Now, this is where things get a little bit interesting for for boots, anyways. The rule of thumb is that you're gonna want to keep speed main stat boots. These are the most important things in your game. Like these are the ones that you're going to be using across most of the artifact sets, and this is very important. Right now, whether or not you end up using some of these is another because the substats are important in the kind of micromanagement of your gear. Like that's not very good. Like I'm honestly highly unlikely I'm going to use that because it's flat stat as well. Right. And blue, I don't tend to if you see what I have, I basically am not using blue very much anymore. So I can pretty much get rid of this. And I would say when you get rid of blue gear, this is going to vary. Like for my mercurial boots, you see that I have a lot of primary stat speed boots. So I have a lot of things to choose from. So it's very unlikely at this point in time that I'm going to choose a blue boot over one of these purple ones because the difference between a blue and a purple is that you lose a roll, right? So basically here you can see three stats at level one or at level zero, I guess. And on blue, you would only have two stats. So it makes you more aware of whether or not a gear piece is good or not. So if you have lots of availability, for example, I would not keep any blue gear around. So as you get more and more pieces and you have more and more options, that's when you can start selling off your blue gear because you're probably not going to use them because you're going to have plenty of, possible items in the purple or higher category. And it doesn't take very long to get that, depending on what set it is. You're eventually going to get there. Now, I want to talk about artifact sets in general. I know I'm jumping around a bit, but I do want to talk about this because I've made alt accounts and I played them for a few months. It does take a lot of time to do, two full Raid Shadow Legends accounts, I'll be honest, so I don't continually play them forever. But I want to talk about the different sets that you get from the main dungeon sets, and that's going to be Ice Golem's Peak, Dragon's Lair, Fire Knight's Castle, right? These are the three main ones. And when you're running Spider's Den, I talked about accessories a little bit, but I would say about 3 to 4 months on, you're probably not even keeping the gear sets from this anyways, because there's always going to be like some event dungeon running where it's kind of better just to make sure you keep, like in this case, chronophage accessories. Like that would be much better. Flat regular dungeons need a massive rework, and that's kind of my problem with them. When it comes to Ice Golem, the artifact sets on the side, most of these you are just not going to use anyways beyond, like, I would say 3 to 4 months. And I got to be perfectly honest, even if you get hard mode versions and you get like 5 to 6 star gear pieces, like by and large most of these sets kind of suck. That being said, there is a niche use for some of them, namely Cursed, Reflex, and that's probably about it. You might use some of these very early on, especially in the gloves, chest, and boots category for speed main stat boots, for certain, crit rate gloves, this kind of thing. But later on, you're really not going to be using any of these sets. And I, by and large, sell all of this whenever I get it. When it comes to my auto battles, for example, you can set your multi battle, you can set your filters for gear. And as you can see, like I only keep 6 star gear. I don't even keep blue gear at all. And you can see that I've basically unticked everything except for provoke, cursed, reflex, and retaliation. You can't see because of the QR code, but these I have available, and the rest I just auto sell. So they're just not very good. And even then, honestly, I probably don't use much of what I am keeping. So yeah, I'm really, once you get to a certain point of your gameplay, which is very soon, you just really don't use much of this. It is worth keeping a couple of sets of Reflex and Cursed, which is why I do have it there and I still pick up these gear pieces, but it's very, very niche for later in the game. Now, when it comes to things like Dragon's Lair, even a lot of these sets are pretty crap too. Mostly what I keep in the early game, what I would keep anyways is accuracy and speed for sure. Speed is something that I keep still. If we go look at kind of the filters that I have for this, again, same thing with 6 star. Now, this isn't going to be you till probably about 6+ months. into your roster, but I don't keep 5-star gear anymore. So I'm just only, because of my total available gear, I only keep 6-star gear, purple, legendary, and mythical of speed stat, destroy set, and that is it. No stalwart, no avenging, no days, no frost, toxic, lifesteal, and even accuracy at this point, because I have other items such as feral, pinpoint, perception, right? You can craft perception. So accuracy just really doesn't have any place in my inventory either. So even dragon, like, it's very, very niche once you get to a certain point in your available gear sets, especially as you get more and more of those 9-piece sets. Fire and Ice Castle is kind of interesting because of the available sets. Most of these are still pretty crap, but some of these are kind of niche. Like Shield set, late game, if you're going for like this Titus Wixwell thing, like you want to keep like maybe a couple of, some pieces to build a couple of sets of this. And regeneration and stun is also something that you may use in the future for kind of more solo sort of builds, or for Cursed City Amius. There's niche uses for this. And then Savage, basically, if you're free to play, this is still something that you can use much of, because ignore defense is really important. So there is a bit more gear here that you can keep in Fire Knight's Castle than the other ones. I feel that by and large, like Ice Golem can be almost ignored, with the exception of like some niche sets here, like I talked about earlier on. And so there really needs to be, I don't know if they're ever going to rework this stuff or not, but it just feels that dungeons kind of are obsolete pretty fast on a new account once you start having access to more 9-piece stuff within like 3 or 4 months. So just something I wanted to raise there. There's also something that I want to raise back into the into your inventory in terms of what do I sell of the main artifact sets. And I want to go back to the differences of 5-star and 6-star. Now, I have talked about this in other videos, but I do want to make this a little bit more clear as well with the stats. Specifically, I want to talk about 5-star. So I tend to get rid of most gear pieces that don't have speed as a substat, just because this is a speed-based game where you do want to make sure that your characters are not as fast as possible, but you do want them to be at least a certain degree of speed or fastness, right? So I'm going to take 5-star as an example here. Now, make sure that when you're triggering to sell gear, do not click on boots, because boots cannot have a speed substat if they have a speed main stat. So you might accidentally sell your boots that have a main stat speed. So I want to go with gear that is without, first of all. So 5-star, you know what? We could also do this with 6-star for the most part. But again, make sure that you have these 5 pieces triggered so you don't accidentally sell main stat speed boots. Now, I'm going to go ahead and select all. You can see that I have 155 artifacts selected, but I am going to cancel out some of these ones that I do have, like level 12 and 16 especially, because I feel like I might have them as some sort of set. That's something that I'm a little bit concerned of, that I might, it's going to trigger some sort of like warning that basically, yeah, part of a preset, and I'm not sure what that is necessarily. So I'm going to go ahead down here, click out all these 12s and 16s just in case, right? You never know. And I'm going to go ahead and do that really quick and sell the rest. Basically, I may have upgraded, I may have done this for gear enhancement. I may have upgraded some things, tried to rework some things as well that just went terribly wrong. So there we go, 12, 12, and that should be it. And I'm surprised there's some still stuff here, part of a gear set. I thought I unclicked everything that was basically leveled up. So that's a little bit strange, actually. I'm just kind of looking at things again here really quick. I don't know what items those would be, to be honest. So I'm gonna go ahead and just sell this anyways, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And that's typically what I would do for the speed substats. But I want to talk about things with speed stats. And this is really important. And we're going to start with 5-star gear first, but we're going to talk about gears that are like basically I haven't touched, that are levels 0 to 4. Now, what's really important about this is looking at the speed stat on it. You can see that at 5-star gear, you have an option of either 4 speed or 5 speed, right? You can see this over here, 4 speed and 5 speed. This makes a pretty big difference, because if you level them up and they do actually land on speed as a substat, you're very likely only going to get a +4 to the speed, right? So 4 would become 8, would become 12, 16, etc., depending on how many rolls into speed. If you have 5, it would be 5, 10, 15, etc. Like most like, I don't think it's always this way, but more likely that it's going to be that way. What that means is that the overall speed that you're going to get out of something that, say, has +4 is going to be less than something that's +5, right? Over the course of multiple hits into speed. So there's no way for me to filter this, but I would go out of my way and sell any item that has a speed substat of 4, because ultimately it's probably not going to give me the total amount of speed that I want to get, right? So you can see some fours here. I'm not gonna do it all right now, but this is something that I'm gonna have to do manually because I can't actually maybe you can filter this with RSL Helper, but something that you typically cannot do otherwise. And this is also gonna be something that you're gonna wanna look out for when it comes to 6-star gear as well. Now, depending on how long you've been playing the game, this might not be something that you'll do right now, but this is something that you'll probably be looking at when it comes to, say, I don't know, when you're like 6 plus, 9 plus months in terms of selling your gear with speed substats as well. Now, in this case, instead of 4-5, it's 5-6. So I would go ahead and sell any 6-star gear that's +5, because realistically, I'm probably not going to use it for me anyways, because I'm looking for the best in the best gear, for being about a year and a half into Raid Shadow Legends. That if it's not +6 like this has, although this has some flat stats and some other issues, I'm not going to use it. So again, this has 6. It is blue. However, who knows, right? Maybe I'll get this to 18. I don't know. I'll keep this for just now. But in general, right, if it's a 5, I'm typically gonna sell it, but if it's a 6, I'm gonna keep it and try to roll it. So that tends to be my strategy of 6-star gear. Now, this is gonna be a lot more specific, because now we're talking about that I'm basically selling off 6-star gear that aren't perfect, which is the situation that I find myself in, that in terms of my upgrades, that I'm not gonna really see any of this unless it's a +6 speed, which will get me up to higher speed totals, right? So this is very niche at this point. Again, I'm not going to really do all of this now, but I just kind of look at the gear. Is it 5? Is it 6? I sell kind of 5 stuff and then move on, right? So again, I'll do more of this later. I'm not really like kind of hurting on my gear now. I brought myself down to 1500 out of 2200, but it's crazy how much inventory management is such a big deal in Raid Shadow Legends, because, and I have to be perfectly honest, I really don't like this myself either. But that's just the breaks when it comes to Raid Shadow Legends, that sometimes you need to sit down and kind of think about this stuff. Now, so I've kind of covered 5-star, 6-star gear, what I keep, what I don't keep, the artifact sets that I like and that I don't like, in which I tend to get rid of. I've talked about some accessories as well a little bit here. And a lot of that, what I just said about the speed substat, kind of is similar for banners, but if you're a newer player, you're probably going to be keeping more banners that have speed substats. I would tend to sell banners that don't have speed substats, but that's because I can be a bit more picky when it comes to my gear. If you're a newer player, though, you might not have that potential pickiness because you haven't been playing long enough to build a big enough accessory pool for your different factions. So that's something that I would keep in mind. It's a bit easier to do when it comes to artifact sets, since you can use this for anyone. And that brings me to the final point that I want to bring, is that because it's free to move your gear around, I tend to build a variety of different gear sets. So in this case, like my Mikey main set, this is like a big DPS attack set. I should label them a little bit better, but I basically labeled them in the way that this is the main character that I tend to use them on. I have like support speed, I have Tholen, which is again another attack based set. I have an Alice set. I have Empress HP, Granite HP, et cetera, et cetera. Leo defense gear, Senna stone skin. And so I tend to move these around to different characters when I use them in places like Cursed City, in faction wars as needed, depending on the set that I have. Again, ignore the names that I have for them, but this is just how I kind of identify them myself. And because this is here, you don't actually need so many sets in Raid Shadow Legends. You can just build like a handful, or a dozen or 2 dozen really, really good sets, and then just move them around your different characters as needed, if that's something that you are okay with doing. I know some people get really annoyed with, but I prefer getting some of the best artifact sets and just moving them around to my characters when I'm using them, or at least the characters that I'm not using every single day. And that tends to be characters in Cursed City and in faction wars. But when it comes to my daily usage, my PvP, my tag arena teams, things like this, my clan boss teams, these are things that I don't tend to move around so much, because I want to make sure that those are always on those characters. Anyways, I know that gearing is very complex. I hope that some of what I said here today helped cover a little bit and helped you guys to better understand my thought process when it comes to selling gear, what gear's worth keeping, what artifacts suck, and like where I use them in my alt accounts as well as I build them. Because once you get to a certain point, and especially even after about 3 to 4 months in Raid Shadow Legends, there's a lot of stuff that you can just really cut out. And I feel that Raid Shadow Legends really brings out a lot of hoarding tendencies for a lot of players. That's just my thoughts. I would love to know what yours are in the comments down below. Now, before I get going, I do want to remind people that you can use the QR code in the top right hand of the screen to get King Galkabar absolutely free. We also have these amazing epics: Venomage, Tagore, and Farrakhan the Fat. Don't forget about Pelos the Victor. You can use the promo code SUPERVICTORY within the first 48 hours of a brand new account. Okay, guys, that's going to be it from me, everyone. Have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next one. And if you like this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and you'll be greatly helping out the channel. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys on the next one.